Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. It is Watches Tonight. I am your host, and this evening we discuss 2022 Rolex watch predictions. All of that, a little bit of live banter, and your viewer wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. Guys, check out the redesigned homepage of thewatchbox.com. Lots of watches, lots of brands, functions, sizes, anything you can imagine. We have over 3,000 late model pre-owned and vintage watches available right now. So open a new window, keep me streaming, check out thewatchbox.com. All right. 2022 Rolex watch predictions. Watches and Wonders is on the horizon. It's starting up this week, and for the first time, Rolex will be presenting its novelties for the model year in its city of origin, its home. The world's largest watch brand will be rolling out some new models and variations on models. And while I don't have any privileged information, no more than you have, I'm going to look at the evidence that we have so far and make my speculative projections about what Rolex will be releasing this year. Let's jump into our live chat box and see who has joined us. We've got Reserve Commander from Harwell, UK, Edward Ledden of Sweden, Wachuziest from Dubai, Joe Pinto of Louisville, Kentucky, Dave Opencar, Enrique Cassiano, The Good Doctor, Steve M. from Ontario, Arto from Manhattan. We've got Pavan joining us. We've got Richard Combs from South Florida, Miroslav joining in. We've got Ricardo from Ireland, and we've got Netminder1 from a rainy Silicon Valley, Joe Tyson from Apex, North Carolina. All right, jumping into the topic this evening, let's consider the hints that Rolex has released on social media so far. We've got a couple. Its Instagram today, if we can go full screen here, was updated with a handful of cryptic suggestions. Now take a look at that frame. That's actually a video that you can play. If you want to see a bigger version of it, go to Rolex.com and the load page will show you this video in wide aspect ratio, and you'll see absolutely everything that I'm about to show you right here. Be prepared, we're advised, but for what? Well, a sloshing seascape portends some sort of nautical novelty on March 30th, and here it is, or at least here's one of them. Zoom out a bit, and you can see pretty easily from the case profile that this is a Yacht-Master case, not a sub or a sea dweller. The light in these stylized shots is gold hued, so it's difficult to determine whether we're actually looking at yellow gold or rose gold, but we know that we're looking at gold because we have a triplock crown. Showing if we can go full screen one more time. We've got a triplock crown here, 3 dots, and the middle dot is the largest, which means that this is a gold Rolex triplock crown. Small dot in the center, flanking big dots, and it is a platinum triplock crown. That's how that works. So speaking of which, by the way, 3-dot crowns. We have British sailor Ben Ainslie, who's been sailing with a prototype titanium Yacht-Master for a year. Now, if you could see this crown, I don't know what it would look like because we've never seen a Rolex triplock crown in titanium, so we don't know what the coded dot pattern would be. We know we're looking at a Yacht-Master come March 30th, and we know that this Yacht-Master has appeared very publicly as what appears to be a pre-production prototype. So it's 42 millimeters, and it's clearly based on the 2019 reference 226659, which was the first 42 millimeter Yacht-Master, and the white gold Yacht-Master with the ceramic bezel on an Oyster Flex bracelet. So this was a very distinctive watch, but it seemed intuitive that it would be the first of a series. White gold, rose gold, yellow gold, maybe even platinum, and it may be that we're on the cusp of seeing some of these variants. Now, I would be genuinely shocked if they released that titanium watch. Currently, Rolex's only titanium piece, that is component, is the case back of the Deep Sea. Not the whole watch, just the back of it. And Rolex generally reserves titanium for use by Tudor, where it's most prominently used on the Pelagos dive watch collection. So I would be genuinely shocked if this watch that we've seen on the wrist of Ben Ainslie winds up being something that you and I can buy, or at least get on the wait list to buy, at a Rolex dealer. 2022 marks 30 years since the launch of the Yacht-Master. So this is a proper occasion. By the way, that was the first model right there. It was a weird one. Blackened indices with the lume outboard of the indices, but I digress. Rolex has also launched the next generation Yacht-Master series. So here's the thing. It wasn't just the 42 that arrived back in 2019. We got a new base reference with the 3235 70-hour automatic movement and a new dial with the Rolex crown all the way down at 6 o'clock. So they've already redesigned the whole model line recently, which is why I think this year we're going to see some sort of evolution of an existing model. I think that we're going to see the 42mm white gold oyster flex become either rose or yellow gold, and the upgrade of the 40mm model is well on its way. So where does that leave us? Well, the most obvious opportunities to expand the collection include adding a rose gold or yellow gold version of an existing watch. Right now, they could take the form of the rose gold 42mm and we would have, instead of a 226659, we would have a 226658. And so that would be the 42 in rose, or in yellow gold, I mean. It would be the 5 if they made it rose gold. So that's what I think might be coming down the pike. Currently, we also don't have a full bracelet rose gold version of the 40mm watch. If you look at the 40mm watch, we've got rose gold with an oyster flex, and we've got stainless steel with a platinum bezel. But if you want a full bracelet rose gold watch, the way you can get a full bracelet rose gold GMT, that doesn't currently exist in the world of the Yacht-Master. Now, there's another chance, and this is a real outside chance, that Rolex decides to go full bracelet with the 42mm Yacht-Master. That would be a monstrous watch on par with the Royal Oak Offshore Pounder, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility that we could actually see this. We could also see a full bracelet yellow gold Yacht-Master 40 or yellow gold Yacht-Master 42. Consider all of this on the table until March 30th. Now, all of this covers potential variations on existing models. The long shot is that whatever Rolex has in the pipeline becomes a true standalone model and not a mere variation on an existing watch, a different case metal, or maybe a bracelet where before there was no bracelet. Recall that Rolex often builds prototypes that never see the market, including the 51mm Rolex Deep Sea Challenger, of which 5 were made for James Cameron and his dive into the Challenger Deep in the Marianas Trench. So if we can imagine Rolex overcoming its inhibition regarding titanium, then it's possible that a very limited run of the Ben Ainslie watch could be offered. But again, we've seen these limited run prototypes fail to make it to the general public, so I'm not holding my breath there. The second way Rolex could blindside us with a totally different model, and Rolex's Instagram is really baiting us here because we don't know. But what if the new Yacht-Master isn't actually a standard Yacht-Master at all, but a reimagining of the Yacht-Master II regatta timer? Now, there's something that would be truly extraordinary. Even in its 2013 steel form, which is the most popular version of this monster machine, it has never received love commensurate with its extreme technical sophistication and capability. This is the most complicated Rolex watch ever made, which you would think would make it very popular. Wouldn't you want to own something that is the most in any regard that Rolex has ever created? Well, the teaser photos here on Instagram show only one crown, and the Yacht-Master II has always operated with a combination of crown and bezel. The bezel turns and operates the movement. The crown first screws out and then turns in 2 positions. Could it be that Rolex has devised a way of operating the regatta timer solely through a single crown and ring command bezel? I'm not holding my breath on this one, but I think in terms of speculation, and speculation is fun, this is one of the most out there speculative prospects, and clearly one of the most interesting if, like me, you enjoy complicated watchmaking. Do I really think we're getting a new Yacht-Master II that operates with just crown and bezel? No, I don't. I think we're getting a yellow gold or rose gold Yacht-Master 40 or 42, and there's an outside chance we might get it with some sort of a full bracelet. Viewer wrist shots. Let me jump back because we didn't do viewer wrist shots number 1, and I feel bad about that. Sean, turn back the clock. Let's go back to viewer wrist shots number 1, and we're going to call out Terry C. and his Breguet Tradition 7097 retrograde, posing in black and white. I like the art focus. Black and white is the artist's medium. That said, Stefano impresses with his colorful Laurent Ferrier Gallet Micro Rotor Ice Blue Dial, KCB and his Tesla Model 3, Drive with the Vacheron Constantin 56 self-winding, looking good. I like both of them. You got a mechanical watch with a quartz car. Conrad combines my favorites with the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter and Acura NSX. And I guess that car would be like a mecha quartz car, like one of those quartz chronograph base movements with a mechanical chronograph, because it's a hybrid supercar with a mechanical watch. All right, we got Kali M, who reminds me of my much loved Zinn EZM 1.1 by capturing his at breakfast. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com. I was so eager to jump into the new Rolex watches. We overlooked the original viewer wrist shots, but you're going to get a double dose with viewer wrist shots 2 right now, starting with Simon H. and his polar dial, Rolex Explorer 2, exploring the sky over California in the Beechcraft Bonanza. Danilo M. is one of the lucky early buyers of the new bioceramic Swatch Omega Moon Swatch, and I'm guessing this is probably the mission to Earth, maybe? Or maybe it's the mission to Uranus. I know they actually made 2 blue, and I think it's the mission to Uranus right here, but they made 2 blue moon swatches. I like them both. I think that if I were to choose one, I would choose the green one. The green one or the Uranus, just because I like the light blue. It has a wonderful cyan look to it. Tobias L. combines his Omega Speedmaster and his MG in Phuket, Thailand. If you prefer a more conventional Speedmaster, this is your model. David R. and his Rolex Sea Dweller look after a souvenir found on the bottom while diving near Hawaii. And Eddie I. has 2 Pepsi bezel Rolex GMT Masters and 2 wheels on his Tomasini bike at his disposal. Send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on my pixels. Okay, so we're jumping back into Rolex. It's pretty obvious we're going to see some sort of new Yacht-Master, but I'm not super thrilled about getting a Yacht-Master 42 now in rose or yellow gold, or a 40 now on a bracelet made of gold. It's just not that interesting to me. What is interesting is that Rolex seems to be staking its model year on seafaring as well as skyfaring. Regarding the latter, it's not clear that only one watch is in store. I think we're only getting 1 new Yacht-Master, but 2 pilot's watches. So first, Rolex itself teased an Instagram video, including aircraft. And you can see there is an aircraft flying across the sky with its condensation contrails and a skywards theme. And that's in their words, not mine, flying above the clouds. So check out Rolex.com right now, and Rolex is even more explicit that we're going to see some pilot's watches. Be prepared to move skywards coming in 2 days. So we've heard quite a bit of speculation that this means a new Air King is on its way. That was the old 34mm Air King, which was the size of the Air King Forever. That reference, 114200 in salmon dial, is a gorgeous little watch that I adore, but it was discontinued in 2014. Now, the name returned as a controversial 40mm reference 116900 at Basel World 2016. This was an Air King with its classical Explorer dial, albeit with elements borrowed from a ground-bound jet, the Bloodhound SSC supersonic car. So while this was an Air King, it was a very obscure reference by Rolex, given that though Rolex designed the instruments for the Bloodhound, the car itself was never made. So a lot of folks had no idea where this design was coming from, and it is very colorful and offbeat by stoical, sober, somewhat Teutonic Rolex standards. The spirit of Hans Wilsdorf still lives at Rolex, even though it's based in Geneva. So Rolex isn't offering a ton of clues this year, but we do have this image from the Skyward video. Now, I don't know how well you can see it, but I'm going to elaborate for you, because look closely and you can see that this uses a twin lock crown. It has crown guards and a fixed bezel. That means it's not a GMT Master of any kind, because that uses the trip-lock crown and it has a spinning bezel, and it's not a modern-day date-just turnograph, which would be the obvious inclusion if you wanted a second pilot's watch in the collection and it weren't to be an Air King. You would say, well, the old Rolex Thunderbird deserved to be discussed. But what we appear to have here is a watch with a twin-lock crown, crown guards, and a fixed bezel, and frankly, this just does not exist in the Rolex catalog at the moment. So playing around with a photo editor appears to reveal the links of a bracelet, and it looks like an oyster bracelet in the background. So the image is the only clue we have regarding Rolex's intent to launch a new Air King. So I'm squeezing blood from a stone here, or maybe I'm squeezing blood from 904L steel, but it also raises another issue. Given that the current 116900 shares both its case and its mechanical contents with the current Milgauss, a full-scale redesign of one prompts questions about the fate of the other, since they are built using the same tooling at Rolex. Could we be on our way to a new Milgauss? Could we be on our way to a relaunch of the Milgauss and the Air King at the same time? Or might Rolex keep the tooling for the old Milgauss, maintain it in the collection for a year or two, and then, after next year's big anniversaries, redesign the Milgauss? Don't forget, Rolex has also discontinued the Milgauss altogether in the past. After 1988, there was not a new Milgauss, or any Milgauss in the collection, until 2007. So Rolex has proved capable of discontinuing the Air King between 2014 and 2016, and leaving the Milgauss off the books for parts of 3 decades. It could happen again. Now, we have another clue about 2022 Rolex pilot watches, and it comes right after the appearance of the aircraft in the Rolex video, and here it is right here. Now you're looking at a watch with a trip-lock crown with 3 symmetrical dots, which means it's a trip-lock in steel, and we've got rounded-off crown guards of the type you see on GMT Masters. Note that this watch does have those 3 identical dots. This means we're not looking at a precious metal timepiece. That's stainless steel, and it's a trip-lock. How many aviation-themed Rolex watches meet that description? There is only one, and it's the GMT Master II, or at the very least, a GMT Master. More on that in a moment. And I think 2022 is the year we're going to see a full-blown revival of the GMT Coke. And a famous look from the 5-digit era could be on its way to a comeback. The Coke bezel first debuted back in 1983 on the 16760, the Sophia Loren, and the Coke bezel was the only bezel featured on that original GMT Master II. So it was the calling card of an early breakthrough model, but it's been absent for quite a while, and we haven't had an actual GMT Master. Remember, the GMT Master is the single time zone watch in the catalog since the reference 16700 ended its 12-year run in 1999. So, remember that the original 1954 GMT Master wasn't a true dual-time watch, and we didn't get that dual time until 1983 on the original Coke bezel GMT Master II. So it's possible that Rolex could reintroduce a GMT Master to serve as the entry-level GMT in the collection. It's genuinely possible that they might think about expanding the GMT collection, expanding production a little bit, and using this entry-level watch to take some of the waitlist pressure off the GMT Master II models. Now, in order to make the junior watch more appealing, what Rolex could also do is give it an exclusive GMT Coke bezel to set it apart from the Master II dual times and make this entry-level watch really cool. Remember, whatever you think about Rolex's watchmaking capability and the underlying quality of the watches, there is a huge fashion factor with Rolex, with even many hardcore watch collectors buying them because they think they look cool. And there would be people canceling their Pepsi and Batman and Batgirl orders to get a Coke bezel GMT Master with just one time zone. Remember, on a GMT Master, as we have since 1954 and the first Pan Am issued models, we calculate that second time zone using the bezel. There is not an independently settable hand for that on a GMT Master. Perhaps we even have an outside shot at giving that entry-level watch or revival model, a black bezel, because the black bezel GMT has been out of the catalog since 2018, and it may be that whether we get a new version of a GMT Master II or an all-new GMT Master, that we get it with bezels not currently available, including the Coke and the black on black. Very possible. Let's see what you guys are saying in the box. We have Nico saying, don't believe a Coke is coming back. I think black on black probably. Who knows anyway? Excited to see what's happening. And then we have BNS saying entry level doesn't matter anymore if you can't buy at retail. That's worth mentioning as a real possibility, because up until last year, the Oyster Perpetual was an entry level watch. Now, never mind the Tiffany blue. Look at what people are paying for the coral red and the green. It's insanity out there, and that was an entry level watch, literally the least expensive Rolex you could buy. We have Pete's Timepiece Safari joining in from Croatia, staying up late with us down in the Balkans. Appreciate that, or yeah, down in the Balkans. Appreciate that. Sorry, I almost called you the Baltic nations. My apologies in advance. What else is going on? We have Soterios saying, ceramic Coke, I wish. We've got Watch Hunter saying, I hope that the buyer of your Zin gives it back to you. That's right, guys. I auctioned off my Zin to benefit a auction that Waco organized for food banks in Eastern Europe, and we got $22,000 for it, which I'm very proud of, because Watchbox also offered a Submariner, and between the Submariner and my ratty old Zin, the Zin won the auction battle. But the good news for everyone is that the whole auction brought in about $250,000, and it was a huge success. So congrats to everyone who bid. You did a wonderful thing. We have Nick Boone joining in from London, staying up late with us in Europe. Dylan Lamb saying it's going to be a new GMT two-tone graphite and gray and a new Air King. And then we've got Tobister saying, I've got my two Rolexes. They are awesome but boring. I've become a Panerai Luminor fan. More personally and more personality and tough. That said, if everyone, people say all Rolex watches look alike, but people also say all Panerai watches look alike. But still, it's nice to know you found a passion for a different brand and a different model. You'll find lots of Panerai options. We've got a question. What are you going to replace the Zin with? You know, I'm thinking about it. There's a couple of great watches out there I really like. There is the Ball Engineer 2 Magneto S, which is just packed with features at a reasonable price. There is the MIH watch, the original, not the Gaia, the original one, which is monstrous. There is the Zenith Windsor annual calendar, the Captain Windsor annual calendar, boutique edition with the smoked palladium dial, which is an annual calendar by Ludwig Oxlin with an El Primero chrono and a palladium fume dial. All of that is super cool. If that watch shows up, I'm going to buy it. But there's also the possibility that I say, look, I've waited for years. De Bethune has always been my dream. I'm in the rare position of actually being at a company that bought my dream watch company. So now we're one firm. Let's see what we can work out. A lot of possibilities, including the blue and titanium Blancpain 50 Fathoms, which is my idea of how a 50 Fathoms should be done. A little bit more understated, but not discreet. Just less brash, less garish, but just as beautifully made as the standard 5015. What else is going on here? We got Jack S joining in from Abu Dhabi. And we have someone else joining in from France. Who was it? The chat box moves so fast. But we had JDA saying 1 a.m. here in Dubai, still up and watching. Mark S asking, what's the difference between Ukraine and what's going on in Yemen? Well, the main difference is that the watch auction was to benefit Ukraine, whereas if we want to help Yemen and other disaster zones, we can give our money discreetly to the Red Cross, which is what I generally do. Two completely different things. One cause at a time, each one worthy. What else is going on right here? We had a question. No, who is joining me from France? I feel really bad because you stayed up late too, and then I missed your name. Oh gosh, shout out again, and I'll catch you this time. Love for Watches PT, hi from Portugal. And Christopher H. saying, why not get another German watch? Why not get the Zeitwerk, of which you've often spoken? I love that idea. In fact, you know what I would consider? One of the Gerald Genta by Retro Jump Hours. Those were really cool. The watches from the 2000s. I love those watches, especially the white gold tantalum model, which is probably too big for my wrist, but I would try to make it work. All right, let's jump back to our regularly scheduled program, asking what else could Rolex have in store for aviation fans? Well, based on the few teasers we've seen, not a whole lot, but keep in mind that Rolex isn't showing its entire hands with these teasers, and even March 30 isn't the true end of the model year debuts for Rolex. I suspect that, like most brands that want to drum up interest and excitement late in the year, Rolex might wait, especially if, as Rolex has often been, it's a little bit behind its sports watch popularity in the dress watch segment. So Rolex has had trouble with Cellini. I would think that if Rolex is launching new models this year, they're going to wait until sometime in the summer or maybe in the early fall when they have the headlines all to themselves and they don't have to compete with others, especially with their own sports watch debuts, and maybe that's when they can talk about dress watches. So I don't think we're done with the Rolex novelties, but if we want to talk about aviation watches we might see now this week, long shot possibilities include a return of the turnograph rotating bezel Datejust, possibly as a Datejust 41 variant. Now, from 1953, when we saw the first turnograph, it was something of a light-duty aviator's watch. Initially, it was designed as reference 6202 for travelers. Later on, it was known as the Thunderbird because it was issued to U.S. Air Force aerobatic demonstration pilots. So it was a rare Rolex watch that had a real U.S. military connection. But it does fit the 2022 Skyward theme. Moreover, it's a watch that gives them another front, a sort of dress watch that might pull some of the demand away from the waiting lists for the new Air King if it comes, and the GMT Masters and Master IIs. That said, it's tough to imagine Rolex having a ton of bandwidth for more pilots' watches this year. And it's also difficult to imagine that we might see a turnograph next year, because while that is the anniversary of the original 6202, it's also going to be a monster anniversary year at 70 years old for the Submariner and 60 years old for the Daytona. And while Rolex does not always celebrate anniversaries the way every other brand does, I got to imagine those are going to be two red-letter events for Rolex. So next year is going to be all about those two. This year appears to be all about the Air King and the Yacht-Master. Is there room for a GMT variant and a turnograph on top of that? I'm not sure, but I hope so, because I love the turnograph, and it's been gone from the catalog since 2010, 2011. It's the coolest Datejust model, particularly once you add white dials, roulette dates, white gold bezels on steel cases. These are really cool watches, and I would be happy to be proven wrong and see a new turno, especially a 41mm turno, in the Datejust collection this year. Okay, viewer wrist shots. Ben S., who pauses for coffee with his Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch Dark Side of the Moon, looking good. We've got Mark F. and his Rolex GMT Master II at Weaselhead Flats in Calgary, Alberta. We got Derek H. in Boracay, Philippines with his Breitling Super Ocean 44 Cobra yellow dial. That is a nice shot right there. Andy A. drives his Jaguar F-Type R with his Watchbox bought Grand Seiko SBJ 405 Godzilla 65th anniversary, looking good, and thank you for trusting our company. Adrian B. celebrates his IWC chronograph Collective C03 limited edition and his 1967 Alfa Romeo GTV, looking good. Guys, Monday mailbag at thewatchbox.com. Send me your wrist shots to see your pieces on my pixels. What else is going on? We have the sociable loner saying, how about a Milgauss that has at least half the capability of the Seamaster 300 against magnetism at a value price? Well, here's the thing about the current Milgauss. I think with the Parachrom hairspring, the anti-magnetic escapement, and the soft iron cage, I think the current Milgauss is way more than 1000 Gauss anti-magnetic. I think it might be close to what Omega has with its 15,000 Gauss or greater anti-magnetism. I really think the current Milgauss is a much more resistant watch than it's advertised to be. They keep the name for nostalgic purposes and branding, not because it accurately describes the watch. I can't see the Milgauss, however, becoming an entry-level watch, because that would make it uncomfortably close in price and size and appearance to something like the Oyster Perpetual 41, which is why I don't think we're going to see an entry-level Milgauss. I do think we could see a new Milgauss, just probably not this year. Jim Millett saying almost 600 live, Tim. We're at 592, Jim. This is one of our biggest shows of the year. I always enjoy the Rolex predictions. Okay, Amit is asking a question. For a watch that comes in multiple sizes, what do you think will age better, a 40mm version or a 34 to 39? I don't think there's going to be any difference between long-term perceptions of 40 and 39, but if we're talking below 39, I think 40 will hold better if it's a sports watch. I don't think people want like 43, 44, 45mm sports watches anymore, but 40 to 42 seems like a good size. Now, if it's going to be a dress watch, then I think that 38 to 36mm is going to be really the sweet spot. I think that's the long-term size of dress watches. I think the days of really big, like Cartier 2000s style dress watches are pretty much done. We got a question about what I'm wearing right now. I'm wearing my Swatch System 51 System Frog, 33rd birthday gift from my mom a long time ago, which makes you realize if a watch can last 4 or 5 years and it costs only 150 bucks, is it really disposable? I expect this thing will still be running in 10 years, and it's keeping excellent time. That said, this is not the long-term replacement for the Sinn. So we get to enjoy that shopping period as I browse and check out options I haven't even considered in almost half a decade since I've been wearing my Sinn as my only watch. Maybe I'll even discover new brands that I had not hitherto considered. What else is going on? Abdul R. Tim, do you think Rolex might introduce a new line? Nah, I don't think they will. They've introduced some bizarre watches into existing lines, like the Yacht-Master II and the Yacht-Master 42. And I just don't think we're going to see something like a Sky Dweller, where Rolex does something no one saw coming. I think it's possible we could see a new Sky Dweller variant this year. Never say never, but we could absolutely see something crazy like a titanium Sky Dweller, or we could get a Sky Dweller that is platinum on an Oyster Flex strap, or we could get a Sky Dweller that has a meteorite dial. Anything is possible, especially since Rolex is emphasizing sky-themed watches, and over the last couple of years, it's been on an exotic dial kick with everything from Stella dials to meteorite dials to stone dials to palm dials. So never say never. I think we're more likely to see variations this year, not a wholesale redesign of an existing model line or an all-new model line. So let's take a look at some predictions, the random and fun stuff this time. So with the new Submariner having launched just last year, don't expect the long-rumored Platinum Submariner to arrive in 2022, since that would be a first ever, at least in series production, not a special or prototype, but in series production, that would be a first ever. It makes sense to wait for next year's 70th anniversary, because traditionally, according to Google, the 70th anniversary gift is platinum. So I expect we will see a platinum sub next year with ice blue dial, and it will break the goddamned internet. Now, we saw the world's first series production platinum Daytona back in 2013 when that model turned 50 years old, so Rolex does have some history of marking milestones with platinum world premieres. Also, in what seems like the first time since I've been shooting these new model year Rolex speculation videos, I'm not actually saying this year that we're going to see an all-new generation of the Rolex Daytona. I've come to realize that Rolex considered the 2016 watch not a variation, as I considered it, but as an all-new generation of the watch. So while it didn't get a new movement or meaningful changes to its bracelet or case, Rolex believes that the adoption of the black bezel and the black or the white lacquer dials was truly the next generation Rolex Daytona, which is why, for the first time since I've been shooting these speculative episodes, I don't think we're going to see any major movement on the Daytona front. Not this year. Maybe next year for the anniversary, but not this year. So, Rolex dress watches, however, have a bit of a mess in their recent history. While attractive and nicely made, nothing from the Cellini collection appears to hold the public's interest for very long. I thought that 2017 Cellini moon phase was a masterpiece. We had a meteorite moon, we had an enamel moon disk, we had a gorgeous fundamental design with a pointer date, and a wonderful size at 39 millimeters in the gold of our times, which is rose gold. This was a special watch, and I thought, surely this is the moment that Cellini catches fire. Well, here we are now, 5 years later, and Rolex has never been hotter, and this watch is all but forgotten. It's the only Cellini you can buy at the moment, but there seems to be a common thread of reasoning connecting Rolex collectors and the kind of general public buyers who drive up the interest in Rolex as well as the wait lists at dealers. So whether you're a collector and you're hardcore about the brand, or you're basically just buying Rolex for its designer value because it's a fashion name that's instantly recognizable, they seem to agree that a real Rolex is a Rolex that looks like a sports watch, and any other Rolex that doesn't look like a sports watch isn't really a Rolex, or at least a Rolex worth buying. This helps to explain why actual Rolex sports watches, like the current Air King and Milgauss Z Blue, also sell slowly, because not only do people think sports watch when they think Rolex, but they specifically think of something that looks like a GMT, a Daytona, or a Submariner. Everything else becomes an awfully hard sell. And remember, right up until last year's Oyster Perpetual 41, even the Oyster Perpetual was a hard sell. Almost no one bought the 39 millimeter watch, and when I find those 39 millimeter white wine or red grape dials, it feels genuinely special. So in a world where a Rolex is a sports watch with some sort of a ceramic bezel or ceramic bezel insert, everything that isn't is going to be challenged in the marketplace. So if anything could revive Cellini, it's likely that perhaps only a historic revival could do the job, taking references that have already become phenomenon or phenomena at auctions and bringing them back and making them rare and picking watches that have nothing in common with the current catalog, so there is no redundancy. So 2022 marks an exciting, if low profile, 75th anniversary of the Rolex Dado Compacts, a watch that was a triple calendar chronograph that continued through several different references, all of which were nicknamed Jean-Claude Killy after the French skier who adopted this model. Take a look at the Dado Compacts and you can see that it would work as a Cellini. This is more of a dress watch than a sports watch, so while it may have been sporting by the standards of its time, today that looks quite formal. It would be unlike any other current Rolex watch, and despite a likely price above the norm for the brand, this would find an audience ready to pay. Keep it exclusive, not thousands, but hundreds in the first year, and these too would be waitlisted. And you may rail against the idea of more Rolex waitlists, but in the world of Cellini, where they just don't exist, this wouldn't be pulling any opportunities away from people who are lining up to get a Submariner, a GMT, an Oyster Perpetual, or a Daytona. This would just be Rolex proving it can make an in-demand dress watch that doesn't end up in a dealer's case, forlorn and ignored. Another possibility is that Rolex could revive the original King Midas. Two reasons for this. First, as an integrated bracelet 1,000-piece limited edition from the 60s, this watch has a vintage following already. The reference 9630 has become highly collectible in recent years, and significant auction results speak to a widespread interest in the model. Second, the market for integrated bracelet watches is very, very hot right now, and originally they made this watch in yellow gold, but also in white gold. And that's something Rolex really needs to explore, because this watch with a full integrated bracelet and case with a white gold case, bracelet, and dial would be exceptionally in demand and very cool. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that the market for integrated bracelet watches is essentially unlimited, and if people can't get steel, provided the brand and the model are strong enough, they will pay for precious metal, and we saw that well back in 2016 with the 40th anniversary Patek Nautiluses, and those were before the market really went crazy for those models. So this is a watch that I think could come back right now, open a new front, stay within the Cellini collection, so we're not creating new model lines to distract from Cellini, we're just reinforcing the line with something that would be different from anything Rolex has offered, arguably since the last of the oyster quartz models were cataloged back in 2001, 2002 or thereabouts. I think Rolex needs to change its view of Cellini. This really needs to be an exclusive collection of watches that sell hundreds, maybe thousands per year, not tens of thousands, because that's never going to happen. Okay, viewer wrist shots number 4. Max L enjoys vacation in Madeira with his Seiko and a sunset, looking good and capturing the moment clearly. Walter H remembers the late and much loved Bruno the dog with his Louis Erard, Alain Silberstein, Le Régulateur. Kevin D takes a macro photo of a microcosm with his Grand Seiko Spring Drive white birch, looking good. Danny S, who is watching tonight, is at San Diego's USS Midway Museum with his Rolex Datejust 41. Looking good, both you and the Midway. For her age, she looks good. John J is at Tampa's MacDill Air Force Base, where I once stayed while attending spring training, with the Republic A10 and his Seiko SPB 151. By the way, the A10, commonly known as the Warthog, officially the Thunderbolt II, built at Republic Field back where I used to work at the Air Museum there. If you're ever in Farmingdale on Long Island, check out the American Air Power Museum where they used to build that plane. Okay, Christian H and his Citizen Pro Master are at Pearl Harbor at the USS Arizona Memorial. Guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you, Sean, for shuffling back and forth with the wrist shots. I appreciate that. Time out, Tim out. We're going to find out in 2 days what Rolex has for us. I will be back with updates. Until then, thanks for logging on.